Thank you, Adama. Excellencies, current and former heads of state, international religious leaders, Dr. Young, Dr. Walsh, Mr. Taj Hamad, and all our conference organizers, distinguished participants, it's so good to be with you here. I want to thank the panelists for their great presentations, and especially the rabbi, to see the work of Christians, Muslims, and Jews growing in the Middle East, especially in Israel. Under Reverend Moon's guidance, we began a work in Israel in 2003. We were asked to organize Christians in America to take away the barriers between Christianity and Judaism, because he saw the vision that if Jews and Christians don't come together, we'll never be able to embrace the third brother of the Abrahamic family, the Islamic family. So he saw that vision being critical to take away anything that was dividing Jews and Christians. And the thing that has divided Jews and Christians for 2,000 years is the situation of Jesus Christ coming. And Jesus came and was not received at that time. And then Christianity grew as a new expression of faith. And what happened over the years is the Jewish and Christian families did not protect each other, especially the Christian family did not really protect the Jewish family over the years, and there was tremendous fear. The Crusades were very challenging. When you think about the first crusade that came, when the Christians went into Jerusalem, it was not an easy situation. It was not a good situation. Jews and Muslims were actually not embraced at that time. It was a different era. But Christianity has to come to this place of really living the teaching of Jesus, which means we have to respect and love all of the family of God. And also at the same time, when we first went to the Middle East, Father Moon told us that one of the #1 things that causes the greatest tension and fear in Jewish people is the cross. The cross was seen as a tragic thing that occurred. Of course, Jesus brought victory through the cross, but it was the cross that creates fear among the Jewish people, because the cross was seen as a symbol of great destruction. And the cross was not an easy thing. When we first called the UPF organizers in Israel that we wanted to bring 120 Christians to Israel to meet with Jewish rabbis, they said, forget it. It's the last thing we want to do. But they heard that these Christians were willing to take down that symbol of division, and they took down their crosses, not leaving their cross as their symbol of their faith and Jesus' victory, but also a different understanding, taking down that symbol of division, of blame, of accusation. And then the rabbis agreed to meet. And a declaration was signed there, a Jerusalem declaration proclaiming that Islam, Christianity, and Judaism is really one Abrahamic family. But we have to take the barriers of prejudice and discrimination and judgment out of our faith. Love has to become the center of our faith. That's not simple. So when we called upon a very famous Orthodox rabbi from Ramat Gan to sign the Jerusalem Declaration, and the Christians were surrounding and the rabbis were there, he said, I'll sign it on one condition. If the Muslim sheikh from Nazareth comes forward and signs with us. And that began this whole effort of the Middle East Peace Initiative in Jerusalem. Sheikh Manasra from Nazareth came forward and signed with the Orthodox rabbi and a Christian archbishop, and history was made. A new condition was made in history. But it has to be based on love, because what Christians understand is that Jesus brings us salvation. That's true. I believe that's true. I'm a Christian. But also we forget that salvation cannot expand without love. And Jesus' love should be the center of all of our interfaith work. And therefore, the core values of UPF center on the faith that we are all from one God. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, whatever, all the major faith traditions, they come from one God. That has to be something we commit to as UPF, Ambassadors for Peace. That's a high bar. That's not easy. For many Christians, we run seminars to help Christians understand that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was sent by God. That wasn't an easy step for me to take as a Christian. It takes time. It takes understanding. It takes a spiritual experience to understand that God is bigger than any one religion. That's why the scripture says, in my Father's house there are many mansions. I used to understand that meant that, oh, in my Father's house there are many denominations, so it's okay to love Catholics, Protestants, Lutherans, Methodists, Pentecostals. It's okay. But actually, after I went to the Middle East for several years, I began to understand that my Father's house, our heavenly parent, our Creator, God, His house is bigger than Christianity. That's a tough one for Christians to really accept. We have a tendency to think that we're the only religion that truly is valid. We will never bring peace from any nation if we really believe that in our hearts. There is validity in every major religion because God is greater than any one religion. God is the creator of us all. And with that understanding, we can begin to dialogue between Christians, Muslims, and Jews without a prejudgment that I'm better than you. And that actually our family has complementary elements. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, and all the faith traditions complement one another. That we're actually meant to come together. That's why when Reverend Moon spoke at the UN in 2000, he said these words: world peace can be fully accomplished only when the wisdom and the efforts of the world's religious leaders who represent the internal concerns of the mind and the conscience work cooperatively and respectfully with national leaders who have much practical wisdom and worldly experience about the external reality or body. In this light, it is time for us to give serious consideration even to the prospect of restructuring the United Nations. For example, perhaps it is possible to envision the United Nations as a bicameral institution where religious leaders and people of faith, academicians, business people, elected figures, elected officials who have faith as their center, faith leaders form the upper house. And they're not simply an advisory council where they come by kind of spiritually and advise, but they have to become a voting council like a Senate, a body that has real power to decide things and complement the lower house, which should be the political leaders and diplomats from all the nations. Because the politicians and the political leaders have their role, they have their place. But their place in the UN is primarily for the benefit of securing peace and benefit for their nation. That's what a diplomat's purpose is, of course, to cooperate with other nations. But religious leaders actually have a vision beyond national boundaries. Religious leaders have a purpose that goes beyond just their national interests because they believe that God actually is over the whole world and that we should have a world of peace for all people, regardless of their faith, race, culture, or nationality. Don't you believe that? That's what UPF says. We should secure peace for everyone. Therefore, what's the strategy that we're going to win peace in the Middle East, especially with Boko Haram in Africa, or with the challenges of ISIS or the extremists that are working to create conflict between the Palestinian territories and Israel? What are we going to do? What's the strategy? Well, the strategy is the same that we saw with the Soviet Union. That's why the Washington Times put out this book called Ending the Cold War and Building a World of Peace. And much of the strategy that God gave Reverend Moon is in here because he saw that the Soviet Union would fall. He saw it clearly many years before it fell. Why? Because he saw that the foundation of the Soviet Union was on a false ideology called Marxism. And that false ideology denies the existence of God. And something that is not founded on truth, eventually is standing on shifting sand. Eventually it will fall. The only thing that allows evil to stand on something that's not true is when the people who are standing on truth bicker among themselves and don't exalt and live the truth in loving one another. And therefore, that same strategy for the Soviet Union is the same strategy for the Middle East. We have to understand that the extremists are not Muslims in true form. They are people of an ideology that have perverted the Quran, and there are Christian extremists, there are Muslim extremists, there are so-called Jewish extremists. They're not really true to their faith. Therefore, we have to understand that we're dealing with the same kind of battlefield. How will we defeat this evil that believes that they can take these young schoolgirls called Boko Haram, this evil force that believes that they are justified by their faith in God and their understanding from the Quran that they can capture these young ladies and take them away to hell, to a terrible place, or even to death? Or the extremists that took the young girl in Pakistan, and because she wanted to study, they shot her in the head. Fortunately, she lived. That's not Islam. That's not true. That's not correct. So what can we do about it? We have to understand how our faith traditions have common ground. We have common ground. There is one God, and we are one family. And that's why UPF has that particular role. Therefore, Islam, there are 1.3 billion believers of Islam. And I believe, as a Christian, they are God's people, and that we should protect them, we should love them, we should embrace them. But there are other forms of interpretation that we have to understand are not correct, just like the ideology of Marxism was false, proclaiming that God doesn't exist. Actually, there's false ideologies within these extremists. We have to challenge them. But when we fought the Soviet Union, we could not be weak. We had to have a strong military. So we're not just peace activists that say, well, we cannot use any kind of defense system. That's not true. Without having a strong defense, the people who advocate terror will destroy your family, will destroy your nation, will destroy those schoolgirls in Nigeria. Without a strong defense, without a strong military power, we will be defeated by evil. Therefore, yes, we say you must have a strong defense. Father Moon promoted that understanding clearly, even as a religious leader. But military actions in war will not solve the problem. It will defend us from that evil force, but it will not solve the problem. Because the problem that we find as we go deeper and deeper, and I've been to Gaza many times, and as I went into Gaza, and I went in south of the Litani River in Lebanon, and when I went into the Shia community that was at conflict with the Sunni communities, when I went into Jordan, I found that actually there are people of God in every community. There are people that are really true to their faith in every community. Therefore, we've got to stop judging people as a whole, thinking all Israelis are bad, or all Palestinians are bad, or all Muslims are bad, or all Christians. It's impossible. We have to transcend that level and go much deeper into understanding God's people are everywhere. And that's why Father Moon also saw that he could go into the Soviet Union and embrace Mikhail Gorbachev, and he could go into North Korea and he could embrace Kim Il-sung. And the reason he could do that, because he saw that the only way to take the terror and the evil and the hatred out of somebody's heart, you have to be strong. You can't let them overcome you with their military. But at the same time, to liberate your enemy, from the evil that's controlling them, you have to go in there and really risk your life for their benefit. That you're really not about your own ideology alone, or you're not about conquering them so I can control everything. You're really about liberating every nation, race, and religion. You're really, truly living for the benefit of everybody. And liberating somebody from the terrors of the evil ideology of terrorism is something we must do. There's a great Sharia judge in South Yemen. Thank you. There's a great Sharia judge in South Yemen named Judge al-Hittar. And many of the Al-Qaeda had been taken into prison because of their terrorist and violent, murderous activities. But as a Sharia judge, he said, you're not living the Quran. You do not believe in the Quran as it truly is written. And he challenged them to a debate. He challenged them one by one to a debate. He said, I'll dialogue with anybody. No matter how evil they were, I will dialogue with anybody. Got to take the guns away, but I'll dialogue. And he went in there into the prison, and every single person he went into extensive dialogue with over the Quran, they converted to true Islam and eventually became peaceful and great Muslim people. It's an amazing phenomenon. That's why we can change the situation. We don't have to fear ISIS. We don't have to fear terror in terms of just being afraid like it's a global thing that's just exploding all over the world. Evil is not strong. Evil is weak if we expose the fallacies and the false positions and principles that they're trying to advocate. Evil is actually weak, but it's strong only when it's not confronted with truth and love. And therefore, what we've seen is that King Abdullah in Jordan did a great thing to try to expose what was wrong with the extremists. He held the conference for 200 Islamic scholars, and they created the Amman message on November 9th, 2004. 50 countries of Islamic scholars from every major Islamic tradition came there, and they developed their positions and unanimously agreed. They specifically recognized the validity of the 8 madhabs, the legal schools of Sunni, Shia, Ibadi Islam, and traditional Islamic theology, and Sufism, and true Salafi thought. And they came to a precise definition of what it is to be a true believer. And based on that definition, they forbade the condemning of other Muslims by Muslims, and also proclamations of fatwa that would simply just be done because some extremists wanted to condemn other Muslims and have them killed. And therefore, the kind of establishment of an understanding of the true essence of the Quran is now being upheld. And therefore, we can't fall into the mistake. We can't fall into the mistake as Christians or as people of other faiths into condemning all of Islam. Because actually the vast majority of Islam is ready to walk with us in peace. They are ready. They are ready to walk with us now. And therefore, Yusuf Abu Ainin, who is the chair of Islamic Studies at the National Defense University, said to defeat terrorism, we've got to really define Islam properly. There's the true Islam, the 1.3 billion believers, and then there's people who live in Islamic states where Islam is part of the government, and then there's the militant Islamists. And they are the ones, the extremists, that do not interpret the Quran properly. They use it to their own advantage. They use it to dominate and create destruction. And therefore, unless we understand this, we can never bring peace. And therefore, I can see the days coming when terrorism will fall. It will fall. We can't do it with weakness. We've got to have our military strong. And if somebody's shooting 1,000 missiles, we have to understand a military in the next state is going to respond. There's no way. And I really question why any leadership of any area would allow 1,000 missiles to go into another country, especially when that country is one of the strongest and most technologically developed militaries on earth. What kind of leadership would do that knowing that it's going to create destruction among their people? At the same time, we have to understand that when military power goes in to chase after terrorists, I went to Gaza many times, if you go into a community and you use mass destruction to try to wipe out the terrorists, you end up destroying all the innocent people. And all that happens is you multiply the resentment. So war and military action for defense, yes, but to bring a solution for peace, it will not work. It will not take the resentment out of the people's hearts. And therefore, UPF would advocate, and my time's up, Zechariah 4:6, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. I'd like to ask all of the UPF delegates and ambassadors for peace to join with us to really create that kind of momentum that Speaker DeVenecia was talking about, that we demand that the United Nations really understands that the Interfaith Council has to be installed with the United Nations. So the faith leaders that are truly practicing the faith and the love of their traditions and respect for all races and all religions can be in the governing and decision-making bodies so that we can study war no more. Thank you. Thank you.